First, you've been coping extraordinarily well with the coronavirus as an association. You've, for example, set aside $50 million to help in grassroots efforts. Just give us a little bit of detail about that.
Sure, Vonnie. Thanks. First, thank you for having me on. As far as the grassroots tennis, in March, we realized quickly our sport was in trouble. Over 90% of tennis facilities in the United States were closed. And then just think about all the teaching professionals that support those facilities. So we quickly redeployed resources, allocated, like you said, $50 million towards our grassroots initiatives to help the different stakeholders. And then that quickly pivoted into how do we address the U.S. Open going forward. And as you talked about, there's a lot of health concerns out there in tennis, especially in light of what happened this past weekend.
And I know that you very generously outfitted the Billie Jean King National Tennis Centre and the Louis Armstrong Stadium during the coronavirus in a borough that was really very deeply hit, the borough of Queens, to help with those efforts. But now you have the ability to refit them and have players play again. What about liability? We saw Djokovic testing positive this week after an exhibition event. Are you insured in some way, or do you anticipate, if there are problems, that you will be able to handle them?
Well, I think, before we get to the insurance, it does start with the health and safety. And when we had to start making decisions whether we should host the U.S. Open, we set three guiding principles. And the first one, and the most important, was the health and well-being of every player and the staff that's there. We have several hundred, nearly 1,000 people who need to support even a non-fan tournament. And then ultimately, we have to protect the health and well-being of everyone in New York. So that was our guiding principle as far as the health and well-being. We have a 16-page document on protocol. It's very detailed, and we relied on the experts of our medical advisory group to help us publish that document.
Do you know, have you got firm yeses from people that they will play? We know Serena is planning on playing, for example, but last year's winners, Rafa, is still up in the air apparently, and the French Open is sort of getting in the way now as well because they've planned to delay until after the US Open. Any firm commitments?
Yeah, we are getting firm commitments. As you mentioned, Serena's all in. But having said that, it's fluid right now. Things can always change. We're in constant contact. We have a great relationship with Roland Garros, the French Open. I was on a call with them a few hours ago, and we're working very closely together to see if we can get players back and forth so they can participate in both our tournaments.
How has the decision affected your sponsorships and also TV rights, and was it because you had promised TV rights and there's obviously a huge amount of money involved? I think it's ESPN, maybe $17 million. How much did that inform the decision to go ahead with the tournament this year?
Yeah, good question. We're in weekly dialogue with our sponsors. We have town halls with them every Friday to go through the different options. And as I mentioned earlier, we had a guiding principle around health and safety. Our second guiding principle was, is this in the best interest of tennis? Because ultimately our mission is to grow and promote the sport of tennis. But third, does it make financial sense for everyone involved? That includes the USTA. That includes the players, and it includes our sponsors and the broader tennis ecosystem. And at this point, we checked all three of those boxes, and that's why we're a green light right now to go ahead with the tournament. Again, that's with the approval of the state of New York and the city of New York, and we'll always have to adhere to those guidelines to ultimately pull this tournament off.
Michael, we've seen states act in very different ways, and we're seeing obviously spikes in other states now. Is there consideration being given to moving events away from those states?
Not at this point. What we've done, we've approached it at the local level. Initially, when the pandemic hit, we put a 60-day pause on all national and local tournaments. And then at the beginning of June, as we saw each community was opening up different, we have 17 sections that oversee the 50 states in our country, and they are now making local decisions on local play.
I do want to ask you one question about Black and African American and other players playing. There's been a push to get more through the ranks so that they have a chance at the national spotlight. What more can be done, do you think, Michael?
A lot more can be done. I mean, we have some great pioneers in the sport, but frankly, we haven't taken advantage of it. If you think of the likes of Arthur Ashe or Serena Williams and Althea Gibson before them, great people in the sport. But again, our diversity needs to increase. We need to have broader representation through diverse communities throughout the U.S., and we're fully committed to making that happen.